Okay, I called Ese, he's coming back now. He was waiting for a new link.
Okay.
Again.
Hi. So we are starting. Where is Aigul?
She's there. No, connecting audio. Yes.
So
We're
she's
all
We're
here.
at 8.
okay. Everybody here. Um. So uh, again, as I presented, so the Gallic population became separated from each other, settled on the small land near the coast. First forced to fishery. Uh, they became really poor and of the low social standing. Uh, since then, they were forced to have. So they actually from. So since nobody wanted to marry them, there was a strong endogamy within this society, and they were segregated in church. So different services in English and Gaelic. And also, this segregation was in school, but it's not primary, but they actually felt this because all parents will say that don't play around with this associated with Fisher or something else. Uh, so there's a slide actually about saying that this is. It looks like it's not important, but it's important. Uh, there are two types of fishing that is available over there. First is the land fishing, when men fish, pack, and transport fish to the railhead, and it will be transported to, in order to be transported to Edinburgh, or London, or everywhere else. Uh, Women smoke white fish. This is the fish with a white flesh, and sell fresh and smoked fish directly to housewife and hotels. So a woman actually travels with the big bag of with this fish and sells it everywhere and contacted with everybody over there. Children help with bait gathering, collect some band grass from the shore, and so on and so on. And some older children will do some housework. And there is also another way of doing this is herring fishing, when you you have men, women, children, and so on. First, here is a herring that is unpredictably go wherever they own preferred food source, but in most cases move along the coasts from the north to the south. So, men, so it's not possible to do such a work alone. So they collectively bought larger board, and after the World War the first, uh, they became these British herring fishing boats were uh, in so they were powered by steam and became expensive. So they actually usually hired two other shapes in order to work over there. So fishermen follow a herring, and adult women and girls actually also follow herring because they fired out as herring gutters and packers. Um, so as you see, they all will move through the coast, something like over there. So as you see, all of them are moving, and why I'm telling it to you, because they actually in contact with all those languages that were listed over here. So they speak Scottish Gaelic. They use Highland English or Standard English in order to sell it to housewives or hotels, or during the collective work in these ships. And they also contact with Scots people and Scottish dialect of English because they are on the same ships, probably on the same ship. Um, uh, with this making this herring fishing. And the last slide of the history is who did Nancy Dorian work with? Because this is the actually hard question, because the despite the Fisher folk was actually separated, is a separate group in each village, their Gaelic was not uniform at all. And this is the key question here. How did they came there? The only answers that it's possible to get is to analyze old census and clan names listed in those census, and somehow analyze the results. So this is a map from the Wikipedia that denotes old clan names territory. So Sutherland is actually this kind of territory, and you see that there are some Sutherland, some Roses, some Mackenzie, and so on in our villages of analysis. So it was mixed at the beginning, so it's not like they all came from the one place, but it looks like all those villages were a mixture of different dialects of Gaelic.
You mean that in each village there were people speaking like in distinct varieties? The families, for example, were speaking in kind of different dialects in one village.
Yeah, in one village there were a mixture of different varieties of Gaelic. That is really hard to actually measure how how vary they were, because there is no much information about those times. So
is it like it looks like a kind of special situation, because I mean it's strange, isn't it?
I think the same story was in Circassian genocide in Caucasus. Exactly the same story. They were settled from the highlands to the rivers, and separated by Cossacks. But it's not the case that all villages were monolingual, because some villages were actually a mixture of different villages. So new villages, new settlements arise as a mixture. So it's not rare in the world.
So are the are the dialects connected to the clans or to the villages?
Dialects. What we know about Gaelic dialects in the 18th century is really not much information. But what we know, there were some variability over there. It's possible to understand it from the toponymic places that are still there, that presented in the modern Scotland. But what you could say that the clan name, since clan occupied some territory, if the people with the different clan names were in the same village, that we could conclude that it's probably different, so people from the different places.
I don't understand.
So imagine that we have census from the Ambo, and there are several Sutherland families, several Mackenzie, and several, I can't see those. It's better to look at the
I'm sorry, maybe I've missed something. I can't understand. Are these your observations, or does Nancy Dorian discuss
this? She discussed it. It's not my observations. It's that she discussed in her book.
Okay. Okay.
So she discussed it with the in that I'm trying to find, but probably clan. So probably here in the page. Yeah, I think here in the section 421, in the page of 49. So this is about the so about different dialects of Gaelic and about these arguments from clan names.
Yes, thank you.
I still don't understand how the clans are related to the varieties, actually.
We know that Gaelic were different. And we know that there are people from different clans came to the same village. So
Yeah.
since then we actually conclude that they came from the different places, and since those places could be really separated, like this one and this one, they probably used different dialects.
So originally these clans were distributed differently.
No,
and
this
then they
is
had their own, and then
this
they
is
had their
mapped
own
from Wiki.
dialects, and then they moved into another village.
Could you say it again?
So originally, different clans lived in different areas,
Yes.
and they had their own variety where they were living. And then they started to mix up.
The main idea was is this the only thing that we don't know about variabilities from different clans. So we don't know that, for instance, Mackenzie were the separate dialect. We know that probably there were different dialects, like the east, the west part, and the east part. But since the people come from different part, so for instance, west part and east part, we expect that it was different, slightly different varieties.
Okay, so it's not quite directly relevant. It's just sort of a guess.
Yes, it's a guess, but it's one of the source of the variability that is possibly possible explanation of the variability that we see now. They were variable. That's why they have mixture of different forms. For instance, palatalized and non-palatalized in the same village. Okay?
Okay, so you mean that there were different varieties, but you're not sure how that's connected to clans?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So Gaelic speakers constitute just 3% of Brora's population. Brora, Golspie, and Ambo is the three villages that we are discussing. 4% of Golspie's population and 38% of Ambo population. So Nancy Dorian mostly worked on Gaelic in Ambo, but she also spent some time in Brora and Golspie, but she had less data from those other villages. So, and no one from, so when she started her research, no one from the Gaelic speaking fishing communities still fished full time like in the 19th century or something like that, but they had this in the past. So they had this experience. So most of the older speakers had been involved in this. So they remember about it. But in another thing, it's still the equation between speaking of the local Gaelic and being of the fisherfolk descent is still held. So, but after the First World War, number of exogamic marriages was growing. And many speakers included, so they actually know more about different languages around, so they made some effort to reduce the number of obvious English loan words, and some speakers were actually know something about more standard varieties of Gaelic via sermons, broadcasts, and work experience in the fishing industry, and occasional interaction with non-local speakers settled in East Sutherland. So they was aware about different forms of Gaelic, and they actually listened to broadcast and so on and so on. And now we will start discussing what's going on in the book. Sorry for this long introduction, but I decided to have it in order to understand everything myself. Maybe it's not so useful to you understand the whole background, but I thought that it's important. And now we have actually just several slides, but I will discuss some examples in a book. So first, the third chapter called Dimensions of Linguistic Variation in Socioeconomic Homogeneous Population. So the main point that Nancy Dorian trying to do is that all those people, despite they span some time somewhere else, but mostly they have more or less the same background. They more or less of the same social stage, and they also all more or less all poor, and they more or less have the same amount of contacts with other people around. So after this, she's showing different patterns of variation that she found in her data. First is geographically based variation that is really clear. So she claimed that Ambo data from the Ambo village was a little bit different from the villages. So all other villages. So those other villages were more similar. And let's have a look at this example of table 3.1 on page 91. So all the time she actually present her data within these kind of tables, and let's discuss what we see here. In the column we see different variables. So here is the variable of word taking. So it's possible to say it qual and cal. There are two variants. Here we have speakers. So this is first speaker of age 81. And
Yeah.
Eric, I
I
don't see
don't
what
see
you're
that.
doing.
okay, sorry. How to do it? Share desktop. Now you see it.
Yeah.
So all tables more or less looks like this. So we have columns with the variable. And here we have speakers. So here is B1, 81-year-old female speaker, and so on. And B means Brora, G means Goldsby, and E means Ambo. Square brackets here indicates probably not sure about the age or something like this. Yeah, and here the question mark. I can't remember the exact what's going on here, but it's not important. So here is different speakers, and all forms that are presented are either free speech or elicited speech. So as you see, this speaker actually once said qual in elicitation, and this speaker said 13 times qual in elicitation task. And as we see over here, all those cases are more or less qual associated with their Brora or Goldsby speakers, and all Carl firm associated with Embo speakers. Is it more or less clear how to read this table? I will take it as a yes. There is also
Yes.
Yeah, just a question. Why in elicitation you have such a wide range of answers? I mean,
Sorry?
not wide range, but why, for example, for J2 we have 12 elicitation, and for others just one. I mean,
okay, I get it.
It's elicitation.
Yeah,
that you could
it's
make-
elicitation, but it's possible that the elicitation task was not particularly connected with this variable.
Okay, perhaps.
But all data that she shows actually of the same type. So at those kind of tables, and there is no any. I think there is no any ideal table when she perfectly separated two cases and asked the same number of times or something like this. It's not the case. She presented these kind of numbers all the time, and they are all the time different. And there are a lot of cases when it's just one or two or I don't know 4 cases per speaker. That is strange because it's possible that there is some probability or likelihood of that this speaker just didn't produce, didn't have any number of attempts, appropriate number of attempts in order to produce rare variant. There is also this coloring scheme that we see over here, and it's so white is older fluent speaker, gray is younger fluent speaker, and dark is semi-speakers. This is her own classification that she had for the speakers and used through the book, but mostly it looks like she believed, so she used it all the time, but she didn't presuppose anything about it. Okay, so this is the first table that we see, and there are more. I'll remove this. Okay, so first it's more or less clear. So we have the some variety, and we claim that this variety is some variable is geographically distributed. This is the work that done by multiple scholars in dialect research, so it's not so interesting. The second part is age-related variation that is presented in the next table on page 94. So it's just the next page. So here. So here there is an example on locational adverb, because Gaelic tradition had these 2 types of adverbs, and they distinguish location and direction. So being somewhere and to the somewhere, to the place. So these locations, so the problem is that it's possible that in Old Gaelic or something like pre-form that you could find everywhere, is something that you actually find all adverbs are paired in those kind of forms. So there are there are a lot of different adverbs, and they are either directional, either locational. But in the modal language, for some, yeah.
Sorry, can I warn that we're about to approach again a 40-minute limit. So I think at some point again the connection may be lost. and then everyone has to come back again. So I think maybe we should stop using you because it's not really convenient.
Sorry? We stopping now?
No, like in general, this is not a very good idea, I think.
I mean, we can reconnect all the time.
I disagree. I think Zoom is much better than the other stuff so far I've seen.
Well, it's a convenient tool, but if you don't have the money for an upgrade yet, it's not very convenient because it's just going to disconnect you every 40 minutes, and then you all have to come back.
But maybe we should have 80 minutes as an absolute maximum. I mean, I don't know. This is the first time I'm in this meeting, but
yeah. So anyway, if the connection is lost, please come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, the times when we had our group meetings, that it always was 2 hours. So who is?
Exactly. I'm sorry. I'm going back. So this is time. I'm sorry. And if you say it's Skype, this is the right thing. I'm sorry. I'm doing as I have no voice in this. So.
No, it's fine. I also agree that Zoom works much better than other things I tried. But I mean, in our group meetings, we had longer meetings. Why was that? Was anybody in our group who has a license?
Temporarily lifted the limitation, so for a while they offered free service, and then they suddenly stopped.
No, but
I
Samira, actually yesterday we had no such problem. So I think I think it might be related to the fact that you scheduled the meeting. So if you don't schedule it, maybe you have no such problem.
I think hadn't they sent an email to HSC to everyone saying that we got some licenses? So I auto-translated it, but I understood something like that we can claim a license.
It will be in the future, not now yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe next time we can just try not to schedule the meeting and see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah,
So here on my screen you see those adverbs. So for instance, out locational is mich versus directional mach. Up is hurud or versus nord, and down is stan versus van or something like this. So they have those pairs. Some speakers don't use them. So here there is a new so it actually that she called negative borrowing. So if you're not if you don't know what is it, as far as I understood, it's something that in the situation of the contact, when we have dominated language like English, it's possible that when we have usual borrowing, we just borrow something from English. Yeah, so for instance, there is a new word and we borrow it. The negative borrowing is when we lost some feature that we have in our language, that non-dominated language. So we lost that feature because it's not present in dominant language. So this history about locational adverb is exactly this story, that there is no any distinction like this in English. So Gaelic speakers start using only one form that I think is locational for all cases. And here is an example of how it works. So you see in Brora and Gelsby, there are they have more or less 100% over here. So all of them, all those speakers, more or less somehow used the both. And here there is this column is about the when one of the directional form used locationally. So here you see in Brora the youngest speaker in Brora tend to have this, so it's 100%, but it's again 4 cases, just 4 cases, and this is strange to have conclusion on this.
And this gray is for semi-speakers or not?
No, for young full speakers. This is for semi-speakers. This dark over here.
Okay, thank you.
So as you see, more or less your reasoning will look like this. Look at this percentage, and you see 100, 100, 100, and then here we have 0 and 33 in case to 166. In other villages it's okay. Here we see more or less the same picture. So we see percentage, so it's 100 all the time, but it's less than 100 over here. So when we go to the gray zone, there are some 100s over here, and it's not so clear. Personally, I don't like this kind of reasoning because actually I don't like to treat equally those people who have just 4 utterances and those who have 11 utterances, because for me it's a little bit strange, and actually this kind of reasoning is not I'm not okay with this kind of reasoning, but we don't have anything better. But her reasoning is analyzing those kind of tables, looking at the percentage, and making conclusions. Okay? So here this is the age-related variation, because it's here all speakers are sorted according to age. So 80, 80, 80, 70, 70, and so on, so on, so on. So since they are sorted according to the age, you see if there is some differences in a smaller group, then you have this change. This also really strange kind of reasoning, because the actually gap between those speakers is 9 years. Why do you treat it there? So here it's even hard to show where is this, what's going on. But here for elbow speakers, it looks like the older speakers tend to have both forms, but the younger have looks like variation. So some of them 100 both, some of them 100 used locationally, those form. So here we have this kind of, it's not like this column is 100 total, so it's different.
I think, Garik,
Yeah?
I think she says, I mean, you probably read it better, but I read that in chapter 1 she says that this division is because of the data. Because she sees that these are not two groups, but she finds them to be different and two different groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a comment.
Thank you.
Sorry, the call is about to end very soon.
Sorry?
The call is about to end in a minute, so let's prepare to reconnect.
Okay. Since you are still here, I will continue with this gender-related variation. For some reason, she didn't find any. And here there is a citation from her book that I have. So, as a result, lack of enough material, most especially freely spoken material from older Ambo women, makes it difficult in some cases to rule out gender as a factor of invariant choice. Though other cases in which gender is clearly not a significant factor, So now we lost Aigul and Ruprecht again.
And I've missed not only the part on the gender variation, but also the part on age and proficiency variation.
Oh, I'm sorry. And actually, I missed the part on style-related variation.
Yeah, and style related.
But I will cover it now.
Okay. And have you told anything on proficiency variation or not?
No, I didn't.
Because I've missed the last part of your discussion on age-related variation.
So somebody connected. Aigul is here. Ruprecht.
Well, it used to be 8, but now it's 7.
Yeah, Ruprecht is absent.
Well, I thought maybe one of the things with the licenses is that maybe it provides like the first try for an indefinite period of time, and there are some attempts like that. Maybe it works like that, and that's because you used up all the kind of free attempts.
Maybe.
That's Rupert connecting.
Okay.
Hi, I'm here too.
Cool. So for some reason she didn't find any gender-related variation. That sounds really strange for me. Because she actually presented how different female and male work was, and I expect some, I don't know, more proficiency in English or something, but maybe it was earlier in 19th century and then it disappeared due to her analysis.
Sorry, going back to our discussion in the chapter of gender. Here, by gender, we are only consider men and women, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because in your description there was difference also, so age, so gender cross age. But of course, people grown up from, I mean, all this fishing style, this labor division doesn't stand anymore when she made the film, right? It's not that there were young girls who do this and old women who do that.
I think they all do more or less the same. This housework was on women part, and no women allowed on the ship because it's bad luck. So.
Okay.
So no women fishing or something like this. So for me, it's really strange that there is no any gender-related variation, but. Okay, maybe it's true. There is also something that she called style-related variation. So there are two persons in her data set who frequently performance of proverbs or rhymes or something. And then she found something that when they performance those proverbs or rhymes, they use some other languages, some other features. So, for instance, when have polysyllabic form when it in proverb or rhyme, but it's mostly monosyllabic when it in the usual speech. For me, this is really strange thing because when you provide proverb and rhyme or something, it's something that you are not inventing. So first you think it's not something that you invent and something repeat after another. So for instance, there are some examples of rhymes that were, I don't know, some songs that were sung in childhood, so you repeat after your mother the song, even not understanding all words over there. So for me it was strange, but then she actually, I think she presented that cases that there are also some speakers that doing the same stuff, and they use their own single syllable, one syllable word for when in that cases. So it's possible. So I think it's possible. So I don't. But again, there are not much people who will do such a thing, and this is some, I think, different type of discourse that is really hard to show. But she called it style related, so let it be there. Do you have any thoughts about this style related variation?
So it's between normal speech and proverbs. What she studies.
Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure if you study something like this, I don't use proverbs myself, but I definitely know some of them, and I will repeat them the way I've heard them. I won't rebuild them in my way. That sounds strange for me. And even with these...
maybe there's...
Yeah?
Sorry. No, maybe the only thing I can think of is some reinterpretation. So an ancient word that you don't understand and you understand it as something, as a modern word, but it's like a mistake. I don't think it's so much like to not distinguish your normal speech from proverbs. It's strange.
But it also something
I find it very strange that in a proverb or rhyme you get some kind of different form. But is there like some diachronic explanation for this, or?
I don't think so.
Form.
I think it's the next chapter over here. So it's something like this length.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in Proverbs. Proverbs work in a different way from normal utterances because they are also dependent on internal structure. So if you start with the availability of variants in a community, and you have a variant that fits a certain proverb rhythmically, rhymely, or in other ways, it can stay, and it could be archaic, as we all know. A lot of proverbs are archaic, just in Russian. But it doesn't have to be archaic. It can also be just from a different mix of signs of a mix of dialects. Samira, wouldn't you agree? Because I understood now that you are surprised at such a notion. I think it's, to me, very plausible that distribution of variants in proverbs is different from the one in everyday speech.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with having a different variant in a specific style, especially if you're talking about proverbs and poetry, which on one hand retain archaic forms sometimes, but as you said, they may also prefer a certain form because it's more rhythmic. So.
Exactly. So I misunderstood you. I was surprised that you're surprised, but you weren't surprised. Okay.
Yeah, by the way, remember Жадина Говядина?
Yeah,
exactly. There's lots of stuff. This is like totally run of the mill.
That's something that I remember also about the children jokes saying and something. They are nonsense in all the time, and we somehow leave them, and it lives and through ages with this nonsense. But so the examples over here is with nuera and tui. So those variants, and some of them are even two-syllabical, like tura. So tura, nura. But again, maybe I was surprised because I expected something like, oh, give me something new and revolutionary. But this is something that for me looks like really obvious. That's why maybe I was disappointed or something, because I expected something.
Yes.
But it's that I think it's more or less obvious how it works and why they are so. I still don't know why it's style related. Why is it related to style? But maybe it's the definition of style, and I just don't know some terms and need to learn them.
I agree with you.
Okay. And now we coming to the personally pattern variation. This is the next table of 100. Yeah, it's over here, and looks like this. So here we have the only AMBO personal pattern, and as you see, there are 4 different variants that you could find. So who's doing this?
Oh, that's me. Is that me?
Maybe turn off the speaker. If
maybe
you...
I should mute my. Oh, I'm not. I thought you all want to hear this,
Okay.
but maybe not.
Thank you. So here we have 4 variants of the same word family that have variability in 2 places. It's actually the variation in the first letter, that in the first sound. So it could be affricate and could be non-affricate. So ch and t, and there is also the second part that is lach and lich. That differ here. So it could be cherlach, churlach, I don't know how to say, or terlich, or churlich, or turlach, and so on. And actually, as you see, there are 2 parts, and you could find that some speakers prefer some forms. So here, those older speakers prefer some these forms, then some prefer this, and so on and so on. And you could actually think about this as, because now it's presented to us as a four different variants, as you see, and it's actually what I was thinking during during looking at this table, that actually it's possible to represent this as 2 variables. So whether we have affricate and whether we have lachlich form. And as you see, most of the people have those lich form. Terlach is definitely rare itself. So even if it's rare, it's actually 1 case here and 2 cases here. So it's something that I would like to ignore, but actually Nancy Dorian multiple times wrote that it's something that all the time linguists will do. But I don't know how to believe in number that presented by one utterance, so it's really hard for me to thinking. And for this speaker E26, it looks like this speaker used all four forms, but again, the fourth form is really rare and something like contamination of two others. So if you think about two variables, like whether it's affricated or not, and whether it lich looks like the most popular and the most, so it will be this variable, and so the variability will be only in whether you choose church or turch, and in that case you could actually find something like tendency, because church is presented more or less in the older speakers, and turch presented in the younger speakers, with some exceptions, of course, but you could think about this same table, thinking about the combination of different variables, not as the four values of one variable. That's what I thought about this, but they actually, and still it convinced me that those exceptions are actually shows you, since there are several people that I actually prefer different forms. So here there are more or less 11 cases and 100 uses. Here 10 cases, 100 uses for this form, and here I don't know. There are no much numerous cases for those forms, but more or less it's possible to say, even choosing between those two forms, it's something like speaker specific. But you could find out that maybe it's somehow a little bit correlates with the age and not the pure random. So it's hard to show something like this, and so that's how the personal pattern variation works for in her examples. It's important that I actually hiding something from you, because next part she's not like because I presented to her just there are only those different types of variation that she found, but it's not the case that the only those types, because she also found out some sorry, not here, probably the next one, some tables. She presented also some tables. I don't want you to look at this table now, but just see it. I don't know, maybe this way. So her idea was that it's not this this kind of variation that that we found and we discussed now, but there are also different combination of these types of variation. So it's possible to have geographically related and age related variation, and so style related probably not, but personally pattern relation and age related. So she actually thought about different combination of those types of variation, and she provides some examples of those variation. And the last pattern of variation that shocked Nancy Dorian was actually this variant use patterns of sibling pair. And here this small citation is: despite a small family background and a small difference in age, thoroughly local life pattern and long continued use of Gaelic between them, the two showed what seems to me a remarkable set of differences in their Gaelic usage. So here is the case. She found a sibling pair that was the only siblings in the family that shared a lot and still live in the same house, separated by a wall. So it's something like the same house but different parts of the house. But they have differences in their speech. This is sibling pair, so it's brother and a sister. And so the first thing that you could think, maybe this is a gender play role over here. But she also thought about this and somehow prevented us of thinking about this, because she, as I mentioned earlier, think that there is no any gender related things in this society. So gender-related variation. So I don't know, but she was really shocked about this story because she actually started analyzing different other pairs of siblings, because since this is a traditional community, there are a lot of children born. Less children will survive, but there definitely will be huge families because children are also workers, so you could use them. So sibling pair are not rare stuff in this kind of society. So she analyzed different other sibling pairs and didn't find those kind of difference. So what kind of difference she find? Maybe because it was maybe you thought about something when I'm describing it to you, but maybe let I show you the list. Yeah, it's over here. The name is Elspeth and Murdo, and this is E22 and E27. The list of the difference between them is probably here. So it's the whole chapter about their differences. So this is just featured. So as you see, this is one feature for conjugational when Elspeth overwhelmingly favored to, while Murdo equally strongly favored Nuro or Nuera or Ne. The next sentence is next feature, and so you have a lot of different differences between their sister and brother. So this is like this. So I didn't count them, but there are 4, 5, 7, 6, something like, not 1 or 2. It's a huge amount. So she was really struggling with this. And she even noted here, nothing in my professional training suggested an explanation for relation within the closest of kin relationship, and without any obvious social explanation in terms of age, sex, education, but they are of the different sex. But anyhow, socioeconomic background or ethnic group, but my professional training pursued me to record it and report on it. So this is a really nice example, and I think we need to have it in mind, and for now it looks like the only difference that they have is gender, but it looks like she claimed there is no such gender associations between them. There is also, maybe I close it for now, there is also, she mentioned that nothing in the differences that she found in this sibling pair is strange to this village. So this variability that she found in this pair, this sibling pair, it's also, all these variants are presented in this family, in this village, and it's not something strange or something. So this is a nice example that we need to have in mind. Actually, when I've read it, I thought about maybe it's something like, because when we're talking about social linguistic things, in most cases we are talking about something that's similar to assimilation. So we have the assimilation, or sometimes we say that something is different due to some variable. That there are two cases that we actually discuss in social linguistics. Either something is different because of some variable, or something is changing from differences to some unite value. And so that's what we expect. It actually expecting some assimilation, but I don't know any story about this sibling pair, but I also, since they live together and it looks like they have good relationships and regularly talk to each other, it's possible that something like OCP principle, so when the equal features tend to not to occur in the same unit. They presented in tones in Africa and so on and so on. And maybe something like this happened over here, but this is just my thoughts into this story. So the idea is that there is a kind of dissimulation. So you say one way, so I will say the opposite one.
Are we already discussing? Because there are quite a number of factors I could think of, and maybe they were discussed in the paper or in the book. Maybe we're not there yet.
Yeah, we are discussing. So there are not any. She didn't have any explanation.
So one thing is you could imagine these people having parents from different. Somehow that their parents already spoke differently, or you could imagine that. Or the first thing you would want to check for is whether there are any groups whether there are groups of people who speak like this. It doesn't have to be socially defined. It can be like the men who sit together in the evening and drink, as opposed to those who are family people. I don't know. But one of the things that really struck me in Ustia is that there are differences that are maybe not so much socioeconomic, like maybe personal. Yeah, and not so. It's difficult to pinpoint, but in essence here I think of the third wave stuff in social linguistics, and that maybe some of these variants come to be associated with a certain style, not in the way that she says, but of projecting a sort of identity. And here I can easily imagine the identity of the siblings being very different. I mean, they can conceive of themselves as being very different from another.
Yeah, actually, there's two things that I also thought. So first, maybe parents. So since they have different genders, so they spend the time with different parents probably, and so they may be associated with different parents themselves. And another thing, exactly as you said, maybe there are some groupings in the village. So, for instance, friend circles could differ for this sibling pair. But it looks like there are enough people, Gaelic people, to have different friend circles over there. But again, it's really hard to. It's needed to be investigated. In the last.
And not only parents. But also grandparents, because the early experience is very important here, I think. And maybe one of the siblings spent a lot of time with his grandmother, and when the other one was born, maybe his grandmother was already died or something like this, and it's very important and maybe overlooked.
I agree here. So the next slides, as you see, are blind, but I want to show you. It's not like that I didn't present anything, but I wanted to show you here in a book. So
Garek, can you do this in 10 minutes? Because in 10 minutes our meeting will end again. So.
Yeah. I will do it in 10 minutes, so don't worry.
Okay.
So, sorry, 4th chapter. So the next chapters are actually really pedantic. So the 4th chapter presents introduction to speakers and variables, And here she had really nice social linguistic patterns. So may I show you? So did some. So yeah, from this part. So here she had village and origin, and then she had some story about different speakers. Then about age, then about sex, then about the proficiency, then long text about proficiency, then introduction to speakers, and then she just speak about her speakers, like here the codes, and introduce this. So here is the full list. So as you see, there's a huge list of speakers she consulted, and also some variables with these speakers. And so it's worth listing. I think it's nice to look over there. And the next chapter is really long. So the next chapter is a close look to some EMBO variables in the use, and this is just variables. So you have order of presentation, it's not useful, but this is not useful. Yeah, so here is the first variable looks like this, second variable looks like this, third variable looks like this, and so on and so on and so on. So she presented this kind of tables that we've seen before, and discussed those variables, what she see over there and what kind of variations she finds. And this is really long chapter because she actually discussed a lot of different variables over there. So 6, 7 here. So it's as you see, so this is the list of those variables. So a close look, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. And she actually presented some structure of those variables. So she didn't think that there is a variable, there is a variable, there is a variable, there is a variable. She also presented some ideas about and classifications of those variables. So it's also worth looking, and maybe it's worth creating a database of those variables and those numbers. And maybe if we merge all those variables into one database, we could find something new that is not presented in the book. So this is really nice that she presented her data, and we could reanalyze this as we like. The next chapter, I actually didn't spend time reading this, so it's in kin group, peer groups, and variation, and she probably thinking in direction of Ruprecht's idea about the parents and friends. But I propose to discuss those two chapters 6, 7, and 8, and probably some conclusions, and 9th at the next meeting, because I didn't have time to read them all. Maybe because I was really interested in creation this really long introduction. And that's all that I wanted to present today.
Okay, thank you, Garik.
Thank you.
Thank you. So can we just say, I mean, it is very interesting, but what's your bottom line? Now, do you think now? So the overall issue is: do we have? Is this really unwarranted variation, very strong kind? What's your take? Do you believe it?
Not much. I believe in something that it's something that she called this personal pattern variation, because I definitely believe that it's possible for some speakers to have their own habits, and it's not connected to something like age, gender, or something. I definitely believe in this age-related and style-related. I wonder whether it's true that there is no gender-related variation. I doubt it. This idiosyncratic, this is sibling pair story is really interesting, but I need more story. So it's something like it's really hard to think about this. So it could be true, and I believe that it's possible, but I don't know how to make any take off from this sibling pair story. So I don't believe that something like this could be regular, or so for
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, it means you don't you thought the story was intriguing and important theoretically, but you look closer and you essentially don't find the evidence convincing.
maybe yes.
I mean, yeah. I personally think it's
I
also very
expected maybe some kind of explanation because what I get from this is that she's saying that there is variation, but it's not really related to the classic sociolinguistic variables, because there's not a lot of variability in these variables, right? Since they're socioeconomically the same, and there's some slight age-related variation, but it's not entirely clear to what extent this is really age-related variation or variation related to proficiency, it seems to me. I don't know. I expected some kind of approach that can account for these differences, as for example in this sibling pair. But maybe that's in the last chapter, because I saw some things about kin groups and peer groups.
I also
Maybe there's some kind of social network explanation for this pattern.
I also want to convince to you that actually she had some explanation. She had some thoughts where the personal pattern variation comes from. She had some explanations, but I just didn't provided you her thoughts about this. But she had it, and I think the next time it's worth also to discuss your thoughts on this.
Time is about to end.
So she had little piece of explanation herself. I just didn't presented it to you, and this is my fault. But actually, this is a huge book, and maybe we'll find something in the new chapters also interesting.
And what was exciting for me? Sorry. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay, that she doesn't discuss much this correlation with proficiency that Samira mentioned, because I know Nancy Dorian as a specialist exactly on this language shift, language death, and something like this. And I expected that she would discuss this kind of correlation. And as far as I understand, she doesn't discuss it.
She actually discussed it somehow. She somehow discussed it actually related to this personal pattern variation, because she explained those personally pattern variation as actually language shift. So these negative borrowings are actually У меня не подключается почему-то. Может, с твоего?
Да, говори.
We were just starting to talk about the interesting part.
Wait, Garrick is
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
But he's in the meeting.
if you do this again, or maybe talk again for like some time just about these parts, I'd be very happy to be included. But now I have to go.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
me
bye
actually. Bye.
Enjoy your
Okay,
meal.
bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Я тоже, мне тоже пора. Пока всем.
Пока,
Пока
Кертя.
всем. Пока. 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 До следующего раза.
До следующего раза.
Да, до свидания. Спасибо.
До свидания.
Я выключаю.
Да, давай.
Ну вот.
Ну, ты.
Я рассказал все, что я хотел, но вот эта вот проблема ровно того, что на самом деле у нее есть объяснения некоторые, и те самые, но там нужно провести просто еще время, чтобы это все начитать и понять и рассказать.
Мгм.
Но мне кажется, что все-таки вот это введение было важно, потому что как бы без него не очень понятно, почему они так федеративны и с кем они общаются, потому что вот это на самом деле она не обсуждает. Я это тоже забыл сказать. Что на самом деле она четко нам говорит, что они вообще-то знают там дохера языков, и что они многоязычны во многих языках, но это никак не входит. Но это на самом деле, возможно, она обсуждает потом в следующих главах.
Ну да, это в следующий раз, наверное, можно понять. Потому что мне было не совсем понятно, что поведение нужно было. То есть про языки понятно, но как бы вся вот эта история, то, что они занимались разными видами рыболовства, может быть, это важно, потому что я в принципе могу себе представить, если есть вот два таких способа рыболовства, где остаешься на одном месте или ездишь туда-сюда, я могу понять, как это может быть важно, но это было как-то
Не связано,
пока непонятно. Но это может быть потому, что вторая часть книги еще.
Да.
Ну, да, следующий раз.